Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a very fun and very exciting episode for you guys today because we're going to be going over not one but two of the Sharp X68000 Z minis made by Zuiki. And to say this is one of the oddest products that I'm trying to understand exactly why it exists would be an understatement. It is a ton of fun. You get so many things in the box, all of the accessories of build quality that you feel like they released back in the Sharp X68000 days, and then you get a small emulation PC that basically looks like a Sharp X68000. It is a wild ride. It's going to be a fun video filled with teardowns and the like, and we're going to go over all of the different software you can use on this thing. But it is one of those devices, you've probably seen it but haven't heard much about it, so we're going to go over the entirety of it today. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But the X68000Z is one of those projects where you're so happy to know it exists, but you really wonder where the market for it was. It is an extremely expensive kit. If you want to buy the full version of it, you're talking $500 plus for an emulation device. And while I understand that the Sharp X68000 original PCs that are refurbed go for way over that, this is basically getting to Neo Geo levels of collector coveting and price points. I'm not saying it's not worth it, I'm just saying that the price tag attached to this thing is absolutely huge. And big thanks to SNK Kev, one of the members of the channel and Patreon, who basically sent this in to me. He needs one of them modified, and the other one I'm basically going to do some strange things to as well, but he did send these in for the review. If we take a look at the early edition here, I would say that this is Apple levels of packaging. Zuiki went all out on making this thing feel like a premium experience, and I'm sure that was down to the premium price point as well. Now, interestingly, you do get a card in each unit, and it's going to have not only your serial number, but also a special passkey. You cannot get onto Zuiki's website and actually update this without that key in the card right there. It's a very strange process, and honestly the website is entirely in Japanese, so from an English language viewpoint, trying to actually update this thing and work with it can be very difficult, because as far as I can tell, there's no English option whatsoever in any of the on-screen display menus. And if you get the full kit, you also get the Sharp X68000 keyboard, and I would say this is probably one of the nicest keyboards I've ever seen come in any sort of kit like this, let alone a keyboard you can buy online today. But let's go through the mouse first. We're going to walk you through the entirety of this hardware, talk about just how overbuilt and strange it is, and why it's kind of very charming at the same time. Because the Sharp X68000 mouse is a very unique device, and Zuiki's basically done an exceptional job of actually replicating it here today. You're going to see it doesn't really look like many mice you've ever seen before. You are going to have this little cover, and there's a secret underneath that I'll show you in a moment, but you get left and right click, a scroll wheel, as well as a middle click on that, and there's going to be a couple more buttons on one side as well. This is definitely the type of thing that underneath the hand you're going to have to get a little bit used to it, but once you understand kind of the ergonomics of it, I think you will enjoy it more. And it even comes with this rubber silicone case here just to protect it when you're not using it. So when I say the accessories in this box are absolutely massive and fun filled, I do mean it. You're going to see there's a switch down there for compatibility modes, and there's also numbered out of 6,000 because this is one of the early adopter kits here. I'll show you more of the retail kit later on in the video, and you will see you do have those two side buttons there as well. But for the most part, you're not really going to be using the mouse because you're going to want to play games, and if you do pop the top on this, you're also going to see a trackball, which will be useful for some of the games on the Sharp X68000 that do support trackball inputs. And honestly, this must have cost Zuiki a fortune in the molding and the overall engineering. If they didn't put a trackball underneath there, I don't think anyone would be bummed out, but they honestly went the extra mile on all of these accessories. And moving over to the Sharp X68000 Z keyboard, this again is every bit as nice as a keyboard you've probably used on your editing setup, your gaming setup, or otherwise. And this is going to be a very important part of the overall equation, because Sharp X68000 uses a completely different style keyboard than you're used to in the West. It has a lot of different inputs for its own operating system, which is like DOS but different. If we go over to the Human 68K side of things, again, there's going to be some buttons and inputs that you're going to need that you just wouldn't get on a standard Western keyboard or any other keyboard that wasn't for the Sharp X68000. And you will notice here that spacebar is definitely truncated. Learning to type on this thing, if you're used to your standard keyboard, is going to take a few days. Honestly, it is a little bit of a situation where it's going to break your brain once you learn where you have to put your hands and how you can't just kind of swipe at the space key from wherever. But I would say that the overall keycaps here, the feel of it, it is an exceptionally good product. And you'll see here you have different buttons as well, XF1, XF2, XF3, and XF4, with all of the different Japanese kanji there as well. And you'll see see one of them is an Alt, and you'll see here you also have your arrow keys as well as a number pad to the side. I mean it when I say there's some keys on this keyboard you're going to have absolutely no idea what their function is intended for, but learning the overall layout of how it works in the operating system can be a really fun learning experience. Now around the back you do have a switch to use this on a Windows-based PC. I can't imagine it being very useful whatsoever because of all of the different key layouts, but it is there and it is a nice touch, and you'll see again, this is the early access kit that was limited to 6,000 units, and it is wild just how far Zuiki went on every single accessory. There's two different stages of riser on the back so you can get the angle of the keyboard exactly what you want it to keep your wrist comfortable and to aid your typing, and that is again why this kit is so impressive, and I'm sure why it goes for so much money. It is just something that you really don't see build wise in these devices. You're also going to get these different plastic inlays that you can pop covers over so you can understand what some of the function keys do, because again, this is not DOS even if it seems like it. This is not Windows 3.1 even if it seems like it. It is a completely different operating system that you'll basically know how to use 80% of if you use DOS. The other 20% is going to be something you learn. Now taking a look at the actual X68000Z in the box, this is another fun unit. I love that they basically miniaturized the entire PC, and obviously I've been doing the Sharp X68000 series, so it's a perfect time to unbox this thing, review it, and kind of show you some of the games that work on it. And you get a ton of different stickers in here. Stick them wherever you want. You can basically never use them if you don't want to as well. You also get an instruction manual which is entirely in Japanese. If you do not read or write Japanese or speak it, don't expect to find any information about this online. You're basically going to have to translate it yourself or try to find English speaking forums where they talk about how it actually works, because this is definitely just intended for the Japanese audience where the Sharp X68000 was huge. So there is a massive barrier to understanding how things work off the top until you spend a lot of time with it. But the fun continues here in the actual software that ships with this unit. We have Human 68K, we have Gradius, we also have Trorenshaw 68K, and they're in these little tiny floppy disk-like cases. The entire medium setup for this device is going to be SD cards. You'll see here when we actually pop one open, it's going to have an SD card inside of it, but these look like tiny little floppy disks, 5 1/4 that you would see on an actual Sharp X68000, and this again is just part of the charm of the X68000Z. Every single thing you touch is over-engineered, over-designed, and feels premium. You even get a nice foam insert in the cases, and every single SD card has its own label, and you will put these things in like floppy disks to actually run the software, and that again just makes this feel like a completely premium product. But I guess the question is, for the price point of the unit with the controller, the keyboard, the mouse, and the actual emulation box itself, you're talking like $500 to $700 depending on where you buy it from, and that really is a question I can't answer as to whether or not it's worth it. You have to decide for yourself. And that last disc here is Human 68K version 1.0, and you will see it in real time load up on the unit, and this again is something that's going to look quasi familiar. It has a Windows 3.1 vibe to it, is a graphical user interface, but again, this is Human, not something made by Windows, so it is going to be something that you need to learn at least a little bit. Now, if you're just trying to play games on this thing, there's many different ways to launch them, including the software that comes in the box, but if you actually want to treat this thing like a real Sharp X68000 PC, and you've never learned one before or used one before, it is going to be a very steep learning curve, but maybe that is where some of the fun is here. And we can definitely just run basic as well, so you get to a menu that'll look at least a little bit more familiar if you grew up in the 386 or 486 era where DOS was basically on every single PC. But you're going to see it resembles DOS, it functions a lot like DOS would, but it definitely does a lot of things different, and it's not going to be a tutorial for Human 68K or for basic there. You will have to learn those on your own. But let's take a look at the actual X68000 Mini here, because it is one of the funniest, cutest little systems I've ever seen. It is so fully featured. You're going to have a headphone port, a volume control, as well as a power button right where it would normally be on the Sharp X68000, and you have those little indentations for stuff like the DB9 port, and as opposed to using floppy disks, you're going to be using those SD cards that go into those miniaturized floppy disk ports right there. You also have an eject button. It doesn't actually eject the disk, it basically just does a software reset, and you're even going to have some sound effects for when it's actually reading the disk. And just like a real Sharp X68000, you're going to have two different SD card slots that are mirroring the two floppy disk slots here. A lot of time times if you want to play multi-disc games, you're going to have more than one SD card in the slots, especially if you add your own files. Disk A is going to have to be in slot 0, disk B is going to have to be in slot 1, so it kind of emulates what a real Sharp X68000 would do, even down to the peculiarities. Now around the back of the unit, you're going to get a lot of fake ports here in the plastic mold, but the important ones are going to be USB power in, you're going to have a 4 USB port hub there, you're going to have a full-size HDMI out, and you're also going to have that UART port, which 99 out of 100 of you are never going to touch whatsoever, so we really won't get too deep into what that's supposed to do. And additionally, there is a door here, which would basically be an expansion slot on a Sharp X68000 back in the day, and of course I had a screw, so I had to open it up, but honestly, I couldn't really see anything in here whatsoever that would do anything. I saw no real port, it's just basically plastic molding, and this is as far as I'm going to go with the teardown, because I really can't find many screws to touch on this thing, so maybe it's just there for effect. But this is the release version that you can buy. That early adopter version is going to be out of stock unless you go to eBay on the secondhand market, and then you're getting close to $1,000, and that's going to be an even harder price to swallow. This is what you can get now. If you buy it, you get the keyboard, you get the unit, and you get the mouse. Now you can just buy the cheaper version of this, the Sharp X68000 Z with the controller, but you're not going to get the keyboard and mouse, while you can bring your own keyboard and mouse to the party via USB. Because the keyboard won't be set up for the Sharp X68000 and its particular function keys, you're going to have to learn how to recreate those keys in different button presses, so it's going to be even steeper of a learning curve. So that is totally something, if you actually want to pick one of these units up, you can decide for yourself. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, but maybe saving that like $500 would be worth it to you. I'd highly assume it would be. Now this is the controller you get in the pack as well, and this is a very hard thing to quote unquote review. It is very accurate to the original Sharp X68000 controller, which is to say it is absolute garbage. This D-pad is one of the mushiest, worst things to play on in my experience. The buttons also do not feel good, and the two shoulder buttons up there have a decent click, but if they were trying to be consistent with what the Sharp X68000 controller was back in the day, they 100% nailed it, so it really isn't any sort of review other than it's accurate, which is to say it's bad. And I love that you even get a little pop-up keyring handle like you would on real Sharp X68000s. You're also going to have a reset and interrupt button at the top that are going to allow you to navigate different menus. But these are the two units side by side, the early adopter edition as well as the retail version, and as far as their overall plastics, configuration, and everything else, they seem to be one-to-one identical. And seeing a Sharp X68000 in such a small form factor, it is hilariously cute and charming, and it kind of makes you want to just pick it up, play around with it, and kind of give it a go. And of course, like I said earlier, you do get a manual explaining how everything works, but it is only in Japanese. You can use something like Google Translate on your phone and get a decent sense of what you're supposed to do, but in the English-speaking world, anywhere outside of Japan, actually getting more information on how to deal with the intricacies of this thing is going to be at your own research. You're not going to find a website that explains everything. You're really going to have to peek around the edges of information online and just kind of stumble through making this thing work and do what you want. And for me, that is kind of the fun. It feels like learning how to use a computer again back in the day when I was a kid. For others, if you just want this thing to be a pure emulation device, could be a little bit confusing. But let's actually play one of the games that came in the box, Shoren Sha 68K, and it is going to be your sound sample because this is software emulation. So go ahead and watch the game, hear how it sounds. It's loading in real time, and you tell me what you think. But 45 seconds and I'll be right back to show you some more. Sounds good to my ears, but you leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. And just so you know, I am not using that Sharp X68000 controller or the keyboard that are in the box. If you plug anything into this USB controller wise, if it does direct input, it seems to register, so I'm using a controller that I much more prefer, because playing a bullet hell shmup like this on that controller is a recipe for just not performing very well. But as far as the emulation is concerned, in the games I've played, they do just work, so it seems like Zuiki's done an excellent job on the emulation of this thing. The interesting idea idea is that it just has so many constraints and so many difficulties. It really does feel like using a real Sharp X68000 computer, and I guess that is down to the philosophy of what you want the product to be and what Zuiki wanted the product to be. This is not something like the Genesis Mini or the TurboGrafx Mini, which Zuiki also made, where you just go into a nice user interface, you pick your games, and you're off and playing. This is something that actually requires learning and time and experience to get the most out of, and just like a real Sharp X68000, if you imported one and never used it before, the learning curve is going to be there. So I actually really appreciate this device for not putting on any sort of training wheels. You need to learn how it works. Outside of the couple games that come in the case that you just pop in on the main menu and execute with the A button, every other game you want to add to this thing has to be added with a special file format that barely exists. You're going to be using Python scripts to convert games over to run on it, and you're going to have to flash your own SD cards with a maximum limit of 32 gigabytes, so it can be very constraining, but you will see here at least we do get save states, which is going to be nice. So really the Sharp X68000Z is one of the oddest, strangest, and most confusing things I've ever played around with, but I actually love it for that. And you'll see there the load states work perfectly fine. It doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't explain what it is that's trying to do. You use it like a new computer out of the box, and you figure it out yourself, and that is why it really is endearing to me. It makes you learn, it makes you experience what using a Sharp X68000 back in the day would have been if you'd never seen one before and you got one for Christmas and opened the box. But I've been doing the Sharp X68000 series, you guys have been asking about this, so I figured I would review it, and my review is, it makes no sense and I love it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.